Hello, both sides of the conversation family. We welcome you to this virtual space crafted especially for you. My name is Jada Curry, and I'm both sides of the conversation's marketing director and graphics design specialist. I want to take some time to ground us all as a community into this space we are about to open up in, so let's go through our community standards. Both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation, so we ask that you all be respectful of that. We also ask that you be respectful of each panelist, host, and participant. We do encourage healthy debates and conversations. Don't personalize anything with anyone. This includes name-calling, bullying, trolling, or shaming. This will not be allowed or tolerated. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but show respect. These community standards apply to all of our live shows and any virtual spaces that we hold on social media, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We want to make sure that we are caring for each other as a community. This is our priority in all of our endeavors as both sides of the conversation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's show and continue to stay in touch with us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all of them. All right, thank you for listening and see you soon.
Yo, Mike.
Hello, everyone. Joining us here on both sides of the conversation live. Welcome to the State of Black America. Thank you for joining us today. We are gathered in this virtual space here every Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I am your co-host, Simone Davis, and here is our host, our executive director, John Henry.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm John Henry, Executive Director. Today, we are going to have a phenomenal conversation as we talk about the state of Black America. And we're going to have some phenomenal guests coming on to have this conversation. I think it's important. It's a much-needed conversation in our community as we are in a crisis here in America. And I think this conversation is going to be very important. With that being said, I'm going to jump into a couple of our announcements, and then I'll turn it over to Simone to introduce today's guest. June 6th, we will be having a conversation addressing community violence. We'd like to get some more panelists for this show. I think we had over 4 or 5 major shootings and a couple killings over the past week. Since we've been coming out of this pandemic, there's been an uptick in violence in our community, and I just want to say we gotta have a conversation about this, and we'll definitely going to get some more panelists for this conversation, and I'm looking forward to that. With that being said, I just want to give a shout out to everyone who came out yesterday to the rally at Safeway. We got some work we have to do, but it was definitely an opportunity. But we still got more work to do, but just want to thank everybody that did show up. Shout out to our president, Shaman Walton, for coming up, uplifting the conversation. But definitely there's some more conversation that needs to be had with yesterday's conversation. We have a number of community events that's coming up that we will be getting out. As you all seen the newsletter go out, please tap in, look at the newsletter for some of the events that's coming up as we start getting ready for our Father Day's events. We have Memorial Day weekend coming up, so we'll be putting out more information as the week goes on about where we'll be at in the community. Want to just give a shout out and salute to all of the Palestinian protesters and people that came out yesterday as well. They came out and showed up for their country. And, I just think it's important that we all stand in solidarity when it comes to these different issues that affect us across the world, not only here in the Bay Area and beyond, but across this world. When people are being untreated fairly, things are happening. We have to stand in solidarity. So looking forward to those further conversations as well as things continue to unfold. It's a lot of stuff. We just go keep knocking them out and have them here at both sides of the conversation. So with that being said, I'm going to have Simone go ahead and introduce today's guest, and we're going to go ahead and get started with today's conversation, State of Black America.
Thank you, John. So I'm going to present our first presenter. Her name is Nakia A. Harmon. She is the CEO and founder of Brown and Brave LLC, Black businesswomen owned of cultural clothing line.
I think her mic's muted.
I think she's frozen. Oh,
Good evening, everyone.
All right, glad to have you.
Glad to have you. Our next guest is going to be Ayula Mitchell. She works at the sheriff's office at San Quentin State Prison as a rehabilitation service coordinator in San Francisco. She is a fierce advocate for those impacted by the punishment by the system.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me back to both sides of the conversation. I look forward to a great conversation today.
It's great to have you. Our next presenter is Omar Butler. He is the Chief Executive Officer of New Door Venture, a workforce development organization preparing opportunity for youth, work, and life. He equips young people with the tools and resources they need to become agents of change within their communities, and he will be joining us a bit later. So we're going to go to our next presenter, who is Erica Berry. She is an award-winning author, speaker, and creator of a Women's Standard, a gender-based youth leadership development program designed to remove barriers for female student achievement. With heavy emphasis on literacy, emotional intelligence, and self-efficiency, Erica has managed to motivate and redirect some of the most troubled youth with her engaging and relevant programs.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on the call today, and I'm looking forward to joining both sides of the conversation.
All right, thank you all for coming on. And like Simone said, Omar will be joining us a little bit shortly as he's trying to get in here in a minute. And then we will have another guest in the second hour coming in as well. She's been on the show as well before and want to be a part of today's conversation. So with that being said, we're just going to open up. We're going to slowly get into some of the facts and statistics, but let's go ahead, Simone, and open up with today's first question.
So our first question today is, what is the state of Black America in your opinion?
Anyone could go first.
Yeah.
I'll go first. For me, my basic belief is that the state of Black America continues to need a tremendous amount of healing. I believe that the more we heal from our historical trauma, our generational trauma, our environmental trauma, our personal traumas, the more we're able to be present and productive in our personal lives as well as our professional lives. Oftentimes whether we are quote unquote successful or not, we carry around so much unhealed harm, unprocessed trauma that impacts how we show up. And, and it's ongoing. At the same time, there's so much that needs to be done within our communities and within Black people in general. Sometimes it can be so overwhelming that people have so many feelings about it, they sometimes are paralyzed and don't do anything. So for me, my focus is always on healing primarily, and then lending support to the many other challenges that we face as Black people in America.
Wow. Terrica, you want to jump in there?
Yes, I'll say, I guess the state of Black America, from my opinion, I'm optimistic, but I tend to have an optimistic approach and outlook towards things. I'm seeing a lot more people of color kind of being aware, or at least, having the desire to improve in certain areas and to organize. I think now it's just a matter of what does that actually look like, and what does the leadership for that look like, and what is the the systemic change that we're going to make, and looking for more policy and things like that.
Nakia, you want to jump in there?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you all so much for having me today. It's great to be back here amongst like minds. I think that we are in a state of an emergency. I think that we are trying to delineate between performative and progressive behaviors and actions right now from leaders in our community, from everyday folk like myself and everyone on this platform. I think that if we're going to look holistically at the Black community and within Black America, we need to look at 5 different things, which are civic engagement, social justice, economics, education, and health. So if we start there and really understand what political power and economical power looks like within Black community, we'll have a leg up. We'll have some skin in the game, because right now we're playing catch up to a lot of the behaviors and atrocities that have affected the Black community. I completely agree that we have a lot of healing that needs to be done and a lot of self-accountability and self-awareness, but we have to look at ourselves first before we can point the finger at what changes need to be made within the Black community. But it absolutely starts here with this conversation.
Definitely. I think that's one of the serious points of this conversation is our self-accountability. Too many times we're quick to point the finger at everybody that are doing things to Black community, and then we're doing a lot of disservice to ourselves with the day-to-day things that we do to also perpetuate that. And I think this is why we need to have these conversations. It is real. But I think I want to hone in because Tarika said something I think is very important about Black leadership. And I think, Nikki, you kind of hit on it as well a little bit, but the healing part is very important. I think we have so much trauma build up and so many things that has impacted us over the years that I almost feel like we're in this confused state, or, they say this state of bliss where we're functioning, we're moving, but we're really not, the conscious effort, the part that we really need to be focused on, we're missing by a lot. And I think it is from poor leadership. And I think we really have to have that conversation about leadership, and a lot of times we need to really see what is that leadership looks like. Because again, it's easy to just say, hey, I've been doing this, because I hear this all the time, and I get a little frustrated. And I just want to tell the people out there today, I did take my second COVID shot. I'm a little tired. I'm a little irritated. I'm a little frustrated. But today's conversation is going to get real spicy at some point, because I'm going to spice it up a little bit. But I just want everybody to know my disclaimer is it's real, and it's not going to be nice, because I think we got a real problem with leadership in our communities across this country. And we're here in the Bay Area, we're in San Francisco, but I think this problem is across our nation when it comes to leadership. And I've received a number of emails and calls and concern about leadership and how it's looking across this country, and how leadership is impacting the growth and the progression of our people. And I think we got to really have this conversation. So y'all forgive me early because it's going to get a little heated. I'm going to spice it up, but we're going to have this conversation about leadership. Because I think it's 2 things that needs to happen. One, we have come to a point where it's time for our leadership and some of the elders in our community to go ahead and transfer the power to the younger generation, to revamp the movement, re-energize the movement. There's been a lot of cross section when it comes to political movement and religion. And I think that's a conversation that we also need to have, separating those ties, because a lot of people don't want to get tied with the religious part. And I think when you start combining all of these different aspects of trying to organize and mobilize, and kind of decentralize where people want to come. But there's a lot of things that we need to address with leadership and organizing and mobilizing moving forward. I've been kind of sitting back and I've been kind of observing some of what's going on, particularly here in San Francisco and a little bit throughout the greater Bay Area, to see how people are mobilizing and organizing. And I see a lot of red flags and issues that we have in the Black community. We're not working together. We have these single silos. We have people doing one agenda. We're not uniform. And I think this is also part of the problems that's impacting Black liberation and moving forward, where other cultures and other organizations and other cultures or people are working together and moving, and we're still missing that part. So when it comes to solidarity and it comes to mobilizing, we're not getting the numbers, we're not getting the impact, because it's too much of the single silos, and again, what these organizations and these leadership really means to community. So definitely I want to jump in there. But Tarika, when you talk about what does that leadership look like, I mean, I want to ask everybody, what does that leadership look like? I always say on this show, to me, leadership is about, demonstrating the possibility. And I don't see a lot of leaders out here demonstrating what's possible. I see a lot of leadership, self instant gratification, self-promotion, self-ideologies, and not enough uniform. So what does that look like to you? Because you said that, and I just really want you to hone in. What does this leadership look like? What do we need so that our community can start marching forward?
Before you answer, sis, one, I want to make sure the correct pronunciation of your name. And then also, before we even talk about what it looks like, I think it would be beneficial for us to spend a couple minutes defining what leadership even is. Because personally, I think we put too much emphasis on the word and the so-called position of leadership, when the truth of the matter, from what I've seen from my vantage point, the people who are really boots on the ground in the trenches, doing work, starting organizations, working with underserved populations, don't have name recognition, and therefore would not be considered leader. I say all the time, if you're in San Francisco and you're working with young people and you don't know Jack Jacqua, you don't know who he is, you ain't in San Francisco working with young people. And I consider him a huge leader in our community. He's not Black and he's not a politician and yada, yada, yada. So I'm really interested in also hearing how you all, identify leadership, because I can't name any people who I'm going to say are leading me.
So I agree with you when you say that we put a lot of emphasis when it comes to leadership. And to me, leadership is formed by the people. So we can sit and we can complain like, oh, okay, he's our leader, he's not doing okay. But why are we not focusing on the people that actually put him in leadership? And if we are having a problem with those type of leadership, why aren't we redirecting? It's really the foundation. We are putting these people, or even if we're not putting these people, they are being voted into positions to becoming leaders, but we're not really looking at the sources of how we're not educating our people on how to put the right type of leadership that we need for our community, so we can I understand where you're coming from when you say leadership needs to be redirected, but how can it be redirected when we can't even find the root of the cause? We're not accepting the root of the cause to the leadership.
So a lot of it is the inequitable behavior. So a lot of us in the Black community will stand there knowing that our leadership is failing us, knowing that the person that's in the helm of leadership is doing a disservice to the Black community or to the community, and we stand there and we stand in silence, right? And we enable the behavior. And then people just say, oh, that's just that person. Y'all know how they are, blah, 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 blah. But we're really not invoking change because of nepotism and different things of that nature, right? It's hard to go against the leadership if they have this position of power, right? Like it's like anything else. If I go against the leadership, what's my impact, right? You look at the GOP right now. The one lady stood up against the Republican Party about the things that was going on, and they ousted her, right? So again, going back to my conversation weeks ago, this council culture is part of the problem, and that's why I'm not in support of the council culture, because once we start doing this canceling of people's voices when they speak up, it's going to impact us later, especially in the Black community. So it all starts with this council culture. We got to start getting to a point where we can stand up, voice our opinions without feel like we're going to get punitive, retaliated against, right? And that's what it is. When we have our voices and we speak up, people are afraid to get retaliated against, right? If I say this, how is this going to affect me politically? How is this going to affect me in the community? You get what I'm saying? So again, as community leaders, as elders of the community, as the young people in the community, we have to uplift our voice. We have to empower each other so that we're not enabling bad behavior, because that's what happened in our community, especially when it comes to our churches. We don't hold these people accountable, because I don't want to say nothing about the pastor. Now, we know these pastors are doing a lot of things and that's damaging our community, but nobody say something. We know the wrong, but we don't say anything, and it's part of that cancel culture.
So that's the world issue. We're not starting with the leaders. We need to start with the fact that we are not able to speak up. If we're not able to speak up, how are we going to remove the leaders? So it's not the start of the leaders. It's the start of the foundation of us not being able to speak up in our community. So where is that stemming from? Why aren't we able to come together, unite, and stand up for what is right?
I want to add kind of a perspective on when it comes to leadership, really looking at the whole system of it, because you talked about the silos that we're working in our community, and a lot of times what we'll find is that people are doing some of the same work in different areas, and it causes us to have splinter efforts where, you know, we would be stronger if we all band together and work together, but because ego, pride is something that's very, you know, associated with our culture as well. We can be a very prideful people, and so sometimes it is a pride thing. Sometimes it's a sheep type of thing, just kind of following that leader. But I also think that it's the difference between the war and the battle is something that has been really in the forefront of my brain. And when I'm having conversations like this, is something that I like to drive the point home, because a lot of times when we think about us fighting different battles on this whole war, sometimes we try to, we compare what we're doing to someone else and feel like, oh, well, because they're doing more in this part, or they're on the front line, or they're in politics, or whatever lane they're in, that they may be more of a leader than someone else. Whereas we need leaders in all aspects. We need leaders in education. We need leaders in politics. We need leaders teaching us the financial literacy and things that we need. And so across the board, I think that there is leadership across all different areas. But if we're able to more so band together and stay in our lanes, then that's where we can really talk about really developing true leadership, instead of people being in competition, having ego, the ego kind of standing in our way and things like that. I think that's an important aspect when we're talking about that leadership piece.
I agree with you.
I'll also say I think it's I agree as well. I also think it has a lot to do with the lack of trust and strengthened relationships in the Black community. Because we have so much trauma within ourselves, that means that we're all in a position to possibly bond over trauma. And that's not something that we want to do. That's been our narrative for a really long time, but it's very hard to move progressively and not performatively when there's no trust between community leaders and the people. And even the people, amongst themselves. We have to put the neighbor back and love thy neighbor, because if we really want to have very tough conversations, but also make them solutions-based and not emotional-based, that we have to build relationships with the very people that are in our backyard. And then as a whole, we can go and start to assign leadership roles to people who are not just clout chasers. They're really looking at it because they are the sacrificial lambs for the Black community. And it's hard to even see it that way, but it is a huge responsibility that we assign to people who don't even want that responsibility when it comes to having that leadership title. They just want to do the work and let the work speak for itself. And that's how they're strengthening, relationships in the community. But it definitely has to start with the trust factor, which is definitely missing.
Which goes back to, and I totally agree, which goes back to healing. It goes back to each of us doing our personal work. So my automatic response to people isn't distrust, that I'm able to sit in spaces with people and not agree with everything, but not take the disagreements personal, not getting up, leaving the space because someone said something that I disagreed with, not disliking someone because we don't agree on the same issue. I think that's a big part of it. Why do we distrust each other so much? Why are we so quick to criticize people? I mean, I think often of what gets shared on social media. Why are people so quick to share horrible things about people on social media? Again, if I'm healthy, then I'm going to behave in a healthy way, and I'm not going to do things that are going to harm other people, whether it's by my words or my actions. But we have so much, as we've all said, we have so much unhealed trauma that's how me and my trauma will show up in spaces if I don't do my personal work. And that's where I'm operating from, is a place of harm and not a place of healed.
Wow, it's very powerful. Yeah, ego has a lot to do with it. Trauma bonding is a lot of it. The history and the lack of education of the history. But you know, even with that being said about the history, is I feel like we really get too much history, and I think we don't get enough future. And I've been saying this over and over, week from week. Black folks in America, we have too much trauma from our history, but we're really not talking about the future and where we need to go and how to advance the people. Trust is a big part. How do you build the trust when you try to, okay, I'm going to be the one person, I'm going to give you the trust, right? I got 50 people saying, hey, don't deal with this person, don't do this. I give you the benefit of doubt. And then I get the same thing that everybody else said. It's like, man, I tried to be the one person to give the difference. How do you do it, right? I mean, it's a lot of different points, you know, to jump in on that. But how do we build the trust, right? How do we empower? Because again, I still believe we're in this sunken place in America, especially in our Black communities, urban communities. We are in a sunken place, and I don't know how to get there. You know, I'm trying to do, every person is trying to do their part, but I want to do it collectively. But I feel like it's too much competition, not enough collaboration. Everybody wants this self gratification. How do we get out of this point? And I think it goes back to what she said earlier about, you know, we are prideful people. We are so prideful and how we move. But then if you look at the numbers and where we at, how are we so prideful? And I bring this up not to take shots at people. And I know sometimes I talk, people get offended. I trigger people, but I'm on too many calls. And like Ayula said, I'm on these calls. I'm listening to these people. All I hear about is, hey, I've been doing this for 25, 30 years. I'm this, I'm that. Oh, my organization been doing this. But really, when you step back and kind of really take a view of where we really at, it's nothing to be proud of. We are worse off now in 2021 than we've ever been in American history, in my point. And then if you want to break it down smaller into organizations and community leadership, it is piss poor. You know what I mean? And that's not to take shots at people. It's just, I understand now where the problems is. And like I said, just coming back around, this pandemic has really opened my eyes up a lot more, right? I know where the problems are. We already got the basic foundation of what problems and issues are when it comes to organization, mobilizing, and things of that nature. But for me to step out of juvenile, all my work to come back into the community, I see where the confusion is. I can see why our young people are reoffending. I can see why our community is going down. It starts with the adults. We have a problem in the Black community with the elders and the leaders of the community. And we got to start there first.
We got a problem. We got a lot of challenges in our community. One, I want to just say something, respond to what you said. I'm not suggesting we don't use wisdom. If 50 people tell me that they've had a horrible experience with this person, I'm probably going to I will not interact with them, but I'll definitely proceed with caution, knowing that 50 people can't be wrong. So we have to use wisdom with that. I was speaking more towards like these two sisters here. I've never met them before. I've never seen them before. And yet I get excited. I'm like, oh, okay, some sisters on here. They got organizations. One's an author, one's a this. I'm not like, who are they? You know what I mean? And so, and it is, I know we talk a lot about our history, but our foundation in this country has been separation. We were separated from our families, and within that separation, we were treated differently. And that's the historical trauma that I'm talking about, that if I recognize that that is what's in my DNA, then I can heal from it. But if I don't understand how I can dislike a Black woman who looks like me for no other reason than she's doing better than me, like, that's craziness. And so that's, I just think that that's an important part. And the last thing I'm gonna say, I am gonna smash on some organizations. I'm not gonna call them out by name, but I'm gonna say this because it's a fact. The pandemic, I work in the jails for whoever doesn't know that. I work in the jails here in San Francisco. And in the whole year, 13 months, the pandemic happened, programs were cut in the jails. Basically, nobody was coming into the jails as it normally is. I didn't hear not one organization in our community reached out to say, what can we do to support the men and women behind the walls during this pandemic? Now, they can say, well, I was doing something with the women's jail, whatever. I work at the men's jail, where we average over 500 men incarcerated on a daily basis. So for whoever's talking about they've been doing whatever they've been doing in the community for 20, 30 years, whatever, this was a perfect opportunity to reach out and say, how can I support? If we're going through it and we're in the comforts of our homes, this was a perfect opportunity for organizations and community members to reach out and say, I wonder, what can I do to support those that are behind the walls?
Yeah,
that's
and I think that's powerful. And I want to say this too. Yes, proceed with caution. But again, both sides of the conversation, we also have to think about when it comes to second chances, right? Because you work in the jails, I work with the young people in jails. And sometimes, Ayoola, we work with these young people. Sometimes they might make 20 mistakes before they get it right? So when do we afford them the opportunity for that second chance? Because if we just get into this thing like, hey, I talked to you one time, I talked to you a second time, third time, and then we throw our hands up, it might be the 20th time.
Isn't that equal?
Yeah, it is.
I'm taking it personal that you are back in jail. I've been working in these jails since 2009. You know how many people I've seen come back into jail? A bunch of them. And again, I don't ever say, you back again. I don't ever speak out on the fact that they are back again. What do I need to tell them they're back again for? They looking at me. Clearly they're back again, right? So I'm not giving up on people, and I'm differentiating between those in the community and those coming into the jails. And we're talking about collaborating with somebody, but 50 other people's experience in collaborating with them has been trash. I'm going to proceed with caution. But if somebody comes back into custody for the 50th time, what did Coach say? Some people get it right away. Some people it takes a little bit longer, and some people never get it. But I'm showing up every day as if eventually, bruh, you're going to get it. So I'm going to keep giving it.
Nah, we got to keep definitely pouring out our love to our people. But again, I just want to reiterate about the Black leadership and the wisdom. I am all for our elders. And I know a lot of time I get emailed, here you go, talking about our elders in the community, John, you're bashing elders. What I'm saying is we need that wisdom, but we also need to be able to understand with that wisdom, how do we use it and transfer it to the young people? Because again, some of these messages get tired, they get stale, they get old, and we need young people to be able to use their minds and be able to take some of that information and then monetize it to where we at today. Because again, a lot of these messages, a lot of these spills, we get trapped in the 60s with the civil rights movement. But we're not talking about today's movement, what we needs to happen for our community. And I think a lot of our young people had that experience. And I think that's why when I'm always on my show, I'm talking about term seating, right? When it comes to our elected officials. And I know people get mad because it politically affects them, but we need term seatings because we need these new ideals. I mean, we've had a digital divine gap in politics, where our own elected officials in Congress and the Senate couldn't even figure out the data and what's going on with Facebook and technology, because again, these are people that's been sitting in seats for over 30, 40, 50 years, right? And it has to be a way that we have to keep the information going so that we can break these gaps, because these technology companies are taking advantage of taxes in Congress because they are way advanced. So by the time they really figure out what's going on to properly tax and hold them accountable, they've already made $200 billion. and the rest of our country is being impacted. You know what I mean? Because these people are coming to our communities, we're giving them tax breaks. You know what I mean? They're raising the prices of our properties, they gentrifying our areas, and they moving our people out. And by the time they figure out what's going on, we already 20 years too late. So I think we got to really think about that. But we need the wisdom from our elders, but we need to be able to transfer it and get some of our young people ready and involve the community. And I think that's where this big separation with religion and community is starting to butt heads, because you have to involve the community. And a lot of these churches, they believe in privilege and membership and not community, and that's a problem. So yeah, I want to go ahead and throw it out there to everybody before we kind of touched on the Black leadership issue. But Simone, if you got anything, or Tarika, if anybody want to say anything before we jump to the next question that we had laid out there.
I just had a question referring to when you were talking about the youth. My question was going to be, do you think that the youth are being traumatized out of political position? For an example, what you told me happened in California. I don't know if everybody heard that story, but if you can elaborate on what happened yesterday when you were at the meeting, I feel like our youth are being traumatized out of political, or what you guys call quote unquote leadership positions, when it comes down to the police, when it comes down to NAACP advocating on their behalf, when it comes down to different sectors in the community. I feel like the youth are being traumatized out of wanting to be the new generation for those type of leadership.
Yeah, so the incident that you were referring to a couple of weeks ago, on April 29th, we had a 11-year-old or fifth grader who went into a Safeway store in San Francisco on Church and Market, purchased a sandwich, had a receipt, but yet and still he was racially profiled by the security and the staff at that location. This is nothing new. There's been a lot of complaints from community, some of the people that deal with mental health, some of our homeless people that's typically around that area. Going into that store, it's been a problem with how they handle Black and people with mental health and things of that nature. But this 11-year-old boy, yes, he was traumatized. If any kid that experienced that is going to be traumatized when you're being accused of something, and you're like, hey, I got my receipt, is right here, and you're still being jammed up and being accused. I mean, it definitely is a sad thing, and it's traumatizing for our young people. I mean, and there's a lot of frustrating points inside of that situation that took place. And one of them that really, irritated me as a community leader, and I took full responsibility. I apologize to the family, because as a community leader, I should have been there when the incident first took place. One, we had a large amount of community that didn't even know about the incident. Lucky the principal of the school was a good brother from the community, was able to get the information out to people. But it was, the young people. He brought his whole school. The principal of the school brought the young kids down there, and they actually protested, shut the doors down, and drove people away from spending dollars in the store, and brought awareness and had the news out there. So for me as a community leader, as one of the leaderships in the community, yeah, I was disappointed because I didn't know about it, right? So it started making me think, what is going on with our community leadership, our Black-led organizations? And this is why I'm always talking about this thing of solidarity. Black folks, we show up to everybody else and support them. If there's something going on in our Asian community, all the Black folks rally. If there's something happening in our Latino community, we show up. We show up for everybody, but when it comes to our babies and our community, we don't show up. And I just got to be real. It's disappointing, it's disrespectful, and it's very sad. For me to be at that rally yesterday, regardless of who was putting on. I know a lot of communities say, hey, we don't deal with them, blah, 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 blah. But again, as a leader, you have to look past and this is why I always tell you, look past the messenger, right? The message is, we got a young boy who was traumatized and racially profiled, and we need to show up as community. But we didn't, right? Less than 50 people out there, but then it's like the organization and the mobilization of it, the thought process of how we actually, I really think what Tarika said, or somebody said earlier, I think maybe it was Nakia, about understanding civil duties.
I think you
Understanding
butchered her name, John Henry. I think you
who?
butchered her name and cut it out.
Is it Tariq? Is it
Erica.
Tiara?
T Erica, like Erica
I
with
got
a T
your
in
back.
front.
You know what I'm trying to say. You know I can't say these black
No,
folks'
you gotta
names.
say it right.
Tierica.
T Erica.
It was put out. And thank y'all for correcting me. I'm a little out of it. I told you I'm blaming on my COVID shot now, but I'm bad with names. There's always a problem here at both sides of the conversation. I can't never say nobody's name right. Too many pronunciations and things going on. But you know, the civil duty of our community and really educating people about, you know, how to mobilize. You know, one of the things that I'm finding big time that's impacting us is we don't have a central communication hub, right? So I'm looking into software to kind of bring that together, like different organizations, different people across the city. Everybody has their own little email list, their own little phone number. That does no good for us as a collective as a whole, right? So we need centralized communication. We need a hub where everybody's information, so when things of this nature happen, boom, all of our community is aware. When there's events going on, when there's things that we need people to pull up, we need all communities to show up, right? So centralizing communication is one of the lacking things that I see in San Francisco. I'm not going to speak for the whole country because I'm not all around, but I know just certain little areas, we have a problem with communicating in the Black community. So that's one thing we need to fix. And then mobilization. How do we mobilize and organize? And then the agenda. So I was very disappointed in yesterday because I go, even if it was 50 people here, we should have been shutting down the doors of Safeway, boycotting. We need to understand what is our objective. And I don't think that objective yesterday was really put off. One, I felt disrespected. And I'm going to say this. I got to say this and get this off my chest because it's burning me right now. Okay. We cannot, in the 2021 moving forward, expect racist behavior, systemic racism, when we confront these issues looking for apologies. So when I came out there yesterday, I told them earlier, and I know some people didn't see me. I told them yesterday I came prepared. I was dressed in all black. I was ready to go to jail yesterday. I was ready. I was ready to shut down the storefront and tell the people, y'all can't spend money in here today. But while we standing in the parking lot and we complaining, the people was doing business as usual, going in the Safeway, coming out with their groceries. They walking by looking like, oh, okay, a group of people out, and kept going on about their usual business. And I think when it comes to organizing and it comes to what we're going after, we really need to have a real community thought process of what we're trying to do. We had different sororities and fraternities out there. And again, shout out to them, but where was the organization and what we really wanted, right? Because I didn't hear it, right? And then, and this is what I'm talking about, we're stuck in the sunken place. We have people coming up after the so-called president, which he is the regional manager or the regional president of all the Safeways and Albertsons for Northern California, which is about 237 stores or 238 stores. They asking for an apology. The man never apologized, but we got other leaders in the community going up after he spoke and said, thank you for the apology. I'm sitting here like, I had to go back and watch the video 3 times because I recorded his whole speech. The man never apologized. But me as a Black man in America, the hell with apology. We got to get out of this slave mentality. I don't care about apology. As Black people in America, we need to start organizing and really get down to business. Economics is the only apology that we got to have. We can't sit here and keep asking for. I'm like, the whole time I'm there, we want an apology. We want the hell with the apology. They don't respect us. We got to understand that. The only way they respect us is by our dollars, right? When you shut down their store, when you impact their profits and they're monetizing, then you get results, right? What I would like to see was people coming together saying, hey, you know what? Great. I'm glad you showed up, Mr. President, over 238 stores. What we want is 15% of your profits from 238 stores that you represent. And we want to make sure that you invest in the Black community by one, since we having problems in this Safeway, we want y'all to invest in getting us a Black grocery store, right? We want a college fund for our Black kids who are impacted by this racial profiling. Y'all take the lead in sponsorship so that y'all could go ahead and put a pot together and make sure that our kids is getting a scholarship out of this. Then we want to have a campaign about racial profiling in all your stores, the policies, the changes. And again, that doesn't happen if you don't get the legal involved. So again, I'm disappointed. The people putting on the rally, where is the lawyer at for the NAACP San Francisco? The lawyer should have been there to leverage the change. Only time things change is when legal happen, then they have to make change so we can actually obtain it and see it. But we sitting there asking for apology. Then what do we want? I hear people chanting scholarship. Okay, well that's cool. But again, what are we doing when we're organizing and coming together? We have to have strategic planning and organizing what we want, because it seems like there's a gap in what we really want. Because I'm like, I don't want to hear nothing about, I didn't dress up and get up to come out here for no damn apology. I'm just saying. So I was very irritated, and some people might feel I'm disrespectful. I'm just telling you, I didn't show up for no damn apology. That should have been happening off day one, right? I want to see the change. I'm here to make sure that you're going to follow by what you're saying you're going to do to impact the change. And if that means we got to slow down your process, 24 hours of being open, slow down your money coming into your store so that you get it in your head, we're not playing, to get the change, then that's what I'm about. But showing up to apology, I'm confused. I can't deal with it. It's very frustrating. But the man didn't apologize, don't want the apology. But how do we move forward when we come to organizing and putting a real plan of action together? Because a call of action needs to have a direct and a streamlined process of what we want, and what does that look like with accountability, and who's doing the follow-up, making sure that they implement the policies and making sure that they're not hiring companies. Because I kept hearing people saying, oh, well, they fired the 2 security guards and they did this, but the contract is still with Safeway. They are the leader. They got to understand, Safeway is the people that hire them. So at the end of the day, you're allowing behavior as the leader or the owner of the contract. So yeah, the 2 people got let go, but the same company still got the contract. So what you gonna do? Put 2 more new people in there with the same branding, the same model. So that's what we got to hit on. I think that's a part of it. But I think Black of America, when these type of issues of racial profiling and things happen that's unjust to us in our community, the hell with apology. We got to start looking at how do we economically impact these people to really get the change that we need. And that goes for our police. And I'm going to keep preaching this because I think it's important. Okay. We got to start advocating for ourselves and stop letting these political puppets get caught into all of this and not really putting a bill that really impacts us. They're doing all this surface stuff to mask the problem, but we're not dealing with the real problem. And every city and county, every local official, we need to really hold them accountable. Real police bills. Because the bills that they put out for police brutality in George Floyd blood is a joke, right? It doesn't really impact what needs to happen in the change. One, we need to make sure that all of our police officers carry insurance. That's the first thing that we need to put. That should have been the first thing on the bill. We need to make sure if our nurses, our doctors, and our anesthesiologists and them have to carry personal insurance to do the job, that's what we need our police to have. Because one, that gives the insurance company leverage over the police unions. Right? We need to make sure that the immunity process is removed on all levels, right? And then we need to make sure that we are attacking the financial that we're talking about here. You got to impact the retirement, the pension. Too many of these police officers kill people, do misconduct, they get let go, and they still get their retirement and their benefits for their family. Okay, that dude, Derek Chauvin, yeah, he divorced his wife or whatever, she still get those benefits. That's what we got to change, because when you hit people in the pocket, they think a little bit different. And I think we got to hone in on that, because it's time to start to financially impact these racist institutions. I'm listening on the news today, and the Black Lives Matter, they're asking for a conversation with the president. Like, this is like craziness. And again, I'm not for the Black Lives Foundation. Y'all know I've been speaking on that forever. And Black Lives Matter as a slogan, yes, I support it, but the foundation is a joke. And again, we got to stop letting people that's not representative of us represent for us. And that's why this conversation today is the state of Black America, from people like us that really know what's going on and the things that we need to change to impact the future of the movement. So I'm going to shut up now and let y'all go and jump in there.
I wanted to make mention of one thing. I think it's really important that when we talk about buying Black and owning Black, that we understand that the Black dollar only circulates in the Black community for 6 hours. In the Jewish community, 20 days. In the Asian community, 30 days. So Black people, when we talk about supporting our own, we're giving more of our Black dollars to businesses that know that our Black lives do not matter. Our Black money matters. We have Asian communities that infiltrate and socially engineer within Black communities and take over different businesses. We have restaurants, we have beauty shops. We've been talking about this for years. So they're literally taking away from us. But it's really important that if we're going to understand the importance of spending the Black dollar, what that looks like, feels like, and sounds like. If you are committing to go to a Black-owned business, you can't keep on making the same decisions of going to Target or going to Walmart. There are plenty of Black-owned businesses who sell the exact same products from scratch. We as Black women, and I have my normalized Protecting Black Women t-shirt on today because it is really important to understand that we were in a position during chattel slavery to have to take care of the family. We were the matriarch of the slave master and of our own families. We were bred to have to deal with the atrocities of being slaves. We were raped. We were breastfeeding the white children. We were taking care of the crops. We were cooking. We were doing laundry. We were doing everything. So the same things that we want from these different stores that are not owned by anyone Black, we need to start finding on these Black business directories. There are over 1,000 Black business directories that clearly tell us who to go to for the resources and things that we need. If we're not going to make that decision, then I don't want to have a conversation with anybody, because I feel that there are puppeteers and there are Black people in blackface that walk amongst us all the time. People don't want to have this conversation, but there's a lot of performative, behaviors within the Black community. We just want to protect them so much because they're religious leaders, they're community leaders. We don't want to call them on their bullshit, except my French, but I call a spade a spade. So that's pretty much where I'm at with it.
All right, Tyre.
T, Erica. You just call me T. How about
Yes.
that?
All right.
Nah, you call me T, all right? That's easy. You can't forget that one. I wanted to kind of touch on something that we kind of talked about, and I can't remember who brought it up, but first the trauma piece of it. I think that what I see happening is we're building on our trauma. And John, you talked about like that healing, but kind of moving forward from it instead of building. I'll give you a better example. So there are some speakers, professional speakers. This is the industry that I'm in, so I'm an author and a speaker. So there are some speakers that take their trauma and they build an entire empire on the traumatic experiences that they've had, so much so that they intertwine it into their being that they can't delineate between themselves and their trauma that they have experienced. And I feel like in Black America, that's what we're doing. We have intertwined this slavery mentality, this history of being, enslaved people or being slaves instead of being an enslaved people, and taking it back further than what it was. Because when you talk about the, the Mansa Musas, when you talk about the Queen Hatshepsut and all of these great leaders that we had before we were taken from our native land, then that's the kind of things that we need to more so empower us and give us a clear, kind of a more of a clear picture of what could be possible in the future. And as long as we are sitting and thinking and stewing in our trauma and not healing, because the danger is we think that we're healing because we're talking about it, but that's not the healing. The healing is being able to process it, cope with it, and then moving forward from it instead of staying stuck right there in that space.
Yeah, I guess. Go ahead, Simone.
I have a question, and I have asked this question when it came to Black-owned businesses, and every time I ask this question, I promise I nearly start a riot. But this is a serious question for me, and I want to ask it for Nakia, because weren't you the one that were just talking about the Black-owned by Black-owned businesses? Yeah. So my question is, I know we always say, circulate the Black dollar, buy Black-owned businesses. I'm just trying to phrase this the best way I can. But if we are, say you are that self-skincare product, right? And you're making everything homemade. But when it comes to wholesale and you get these containers, you're not buying that from a Black-owned business. So we're still not circulating our Black dollar the right way. We buy things wholesale all the time. Everyone is saying, yeah, but buy Black-owned business is the way to go. We need to circulate our dollar, but we're not circulating our dollars when we purchasing at wholesales from China and everywhere else that's not Black.
Your mic is off.
You're not going to get a riot out of me. I think it's a great conversation. I have this talk all the time. Listen, I'm extremely open to having very centralized conversations about where to start. We have to create a vantage point. And that vantage point, even if you know that that business is going to profit 75% of Black dollars and the other 25% is non-melanated dollars, that's starting somewhere. So I have a melanated t-shirt business, right? Am I handcrafting and you know, turning the cotton to make these t-shirts? No, I'm not. I'm getting them wholesale at a lower price, but through the messaging, through the Black culture, through the labor that I as a Black woman am putting into this product and then selling it on behalf of what I want people to believe in. I don't care. I care obviously about the profits and the dollars, but that money is being put back into this Black owned business to the point where I would no longer need a third party vendor to get, you know, and to obtain any of the tools and resources that I need to actually make the merchandise. So I want us to be very clear about when we say buy Black, I don't think I hope no one is naive enough to believe that with, you know, t-shirt businesses and things of that nature, that every single piece of that product is 100% Black owned. That's just not the case. It's not realistic. So for me, I would say find Black people who are trying to build Black owned businesses in some capacity, who want to give back to the community, who want to partner with other leaders, you know, to put a message out about their mission and really about what they're doing. But I for one, I can't say that, you know, we could just go Black 100%. It's kind of like, you know, quitting to smoke cold turkey. Sometimes it can't happen, but if we start to recondition our minds about what resources that we should use and, you know, really circulating the Black dollar in some capacity where we know it's going to stay with us and it's going to be reinvested, I guess that's kind of my vantage point with that. But that was a really good question.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised when it comes to that question and the thoughts of how people, I have never had an educated answer like that. And I always come out looking like a bad guy. But when I talk about Black businesses, those are the things that I talk about when we're talking about the economy and we're talking about trying to grow Black businesses. Like, why aren't we capable of having our own t-shirts? Why do we got to go to China? Why can't we produce our own plastics? Are we not equipped enough? You know, that those are the things that it's just like, okay, yeah, we Black owned, but when we gonna start, you know, having the merchandise that we produced? So thank you for answering that, because you will be shocked when I ask that question. It sets off a riot every single time.
I'm not shocked, but it's because we have the expectation that people are just supposed to automatically know that it's 100% Black owned. That's not the case. We have to be transparent. And I think having conversations like this to find other resources of, anyone on this platform right now, tell me what Black man or woman or other can create a shirt from their own two hands or sew me something, and I will start going to them. Because if you don't know, you don't know. And I think that John posted the other day, ignorance is a Black owned business and it's generating billions of dollars. So if you're too ignorant to the point that you don't want to reach out and touch someone, you have not because you ask not. I'm asking for people to provide me with resources. I'm asking for people to partner me and, you know, connect me with people who can take me out of a place where I no longer have to use these resources from China, Vietnam, India, wherever. And that's when I can finally say 100%. This is a Black owned business. But until then, I want that feedback. I need that information. And it starts on a platform like this. So thank you again, Simone, for asking that question.
Thank you.
It's the industrial process. Robotics has taken away, you know, back in the days, my grandmother, they sewed from hand, you know, they made clothes. So we lost a lot of that through technology and innovation. And, you know, that's also a pact in the Black wealth. But I'm going to shut up because I've been talking a lot. I just want to bring my brother Omar Butler on. Miss Kathy Kador is here to help be a part of the conversation. So, Omar, I know he has his camera off. You probably can hear me or not. But once he come back in, I want you to jump in the conversation. We're talking about the state of Black America. We talked about leadership. We talked about health. We talked about organization and mobilization. I want to hear from you all so we can get caught up before we jump into the next question. So, Omar, if you want to jump in there and talk about what you think the state of Black America is, our Black leadership, some of the Black economics, and where you think we're at going and what we need to do.
I'm just following the conversation, so it's great to be with you all. Thank you for the invitation, John, Henry. Good to see you, Ayula, and to the people who I haven't met formally. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, I mean that's a heavy question, so I won't even try to pretend that I could answer it, comprehensively, or at least from my perspective. I think, my answer probably changes based on the latest thing in the media, but I tend to go back to economics. And that the ability to be self-sufficient, to be as self-reliant, to be as self-supportive as possible seems to be really the only pathway in this environment that is really not even set up or designed or attempting to support the strengthening and the success of the Black family. And so when you don't have that level of interest and reciprocity, then you do on your own, right? And that doesn't mean that, to Nakia's point, everything you do will be directed towards, that, but that's the primary factor, right? And that, I think to the question I think Simone asked, I think my frustration is always folks kind of are, just naturally hesitant to support Black businesses, even if it means that, they make a ruckus out of I pay $1 more for this, and I know that's not the norm, but just when I hear that, it makes me cringe when folks are like, oh, that restaurant charges more than KFC, oh, you're probably getting a lot more TLC in that food, or that business is charging more than that, or that nail shop is charging more. We're being conditioned to other each other so much and to distrust each other so much. And it's not an accident. So I just continue to think about how my ability to control my financial situation allows me to make decisions, allows me to choose the type of jobs that I want because I'm not reliant, and my family's health and safety isn't reliant on someone else. And so I'm able to pick who I want to work for, and I'm able to do so under the conditions that I want to work for. And so I think to me, it boils down to this. Obviously, I'm a huge proponent of education, huge proponent of other pathways, but I think when it breaks down to it, our ability to have our own, to support our own, and define the conditions that others treat us, I think that makes a huge difference. And you can see it with other communities, quite frankly. And I think there's been intentional, this is the anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. And so, that was intentional, right? It wasn't that they did that for a reason. It wasn't just like they didn't like Black people. It was like those successful Black people are doing things, and that is counter to what we believe in. And so I think when you think about that, it's done so. And you can see the policy and legislation going on around taking away the right to vote and all the other things. So it's an intentional thing. But I think if we have that economic independence and economic freedom, that allows us to at least have a little bit more control of our destiny.
Wow, that's deep, and I agree with you there. I'm big on the finances. I think the 2-3 major things that we need to really focus on in the Black community is health, mental health as well. That's the first thing, and then our nutrition, and then economics, because the food is poisoning us. And I think that's a big part that we never really highlight, but that goes under the health. So I just put that under health and economics, financial literacy. Some of the Urban League reports that came out was, oh my God, they was crushing it. When they talk about 70% of the nation, the literacy rate in the Black community, the COVID, what COVID has done to the Black community on a literacy level, and how much worse it's going to get. I'm hearing reports our kids are sometimes just going to be 2 to 3 years behind for missing this time, especially in communities where they're impacted with technology disparities. I mean, especially in San Francisco, we had a big issue with the young people being able to log on the internet just to get into the Zoom school, and some of those issues. And then, the Black and brown community continue to get killed by police and ourselves. Big issues that we got to really address. But you hit it right on the hammer right there, Omar. I think the economics is a big part of it because we don't own anything. And we have to really start educating people. And I think Omar got a good balance of that because he is heavy into education and that financial part of the equation as well. Because our communities, if we don't get them on that level of education for literacy and the economical understanding of how we impact the community and use our dollars to leverage the change, we definitely going to be suffering way more than we're at. The Urban League report put out that by 2053, they're predicting Black Americans to be, financially washed out. And I think we could combat that with some education and some literacy. But again, we know numbers don't lie, people do. But when you look at the state of America, when we got people jumping up and down for $1,200 on PPE, it's a concern to me. Like, this little bit of money that's coming should be nothing that we excited about. And then we'll jump into the reparations. But I want to go ahead and give Kathy an opportunity to jump in, like Omar, because she just came in, and appreciate you guys jumping in late. But I want to invite you all to the conversation that before we get to the next question. So go ahead, Miss Kathy.
Okay, hi. Can y'all hear me okay? Because it's kind of going in and out on my end. I wasn't sure because I'm just finishing up a conference. So if you hear any noise, I'll mute it out and just stop talking. But anyway, thank you for having this platform, John, and hello to all the panelists. I wanted to tune in today because I am a registered nurse as well as a business owner. So I have a few different perspectives from a healthcare provider. I do know that the nutrition is very important in everything that they're diagnosing us with. And I've taken care of patients that have had high blood pressure, strokes, heart attacks, and 99% of it can be controlled with food, with the diet changing, because the people that actually changed their diet that were pre-diabetic or diabetic, they weren't diabetic anymore. Their blood pressure went down. So that food and nutrition is a very strong piece. And I do a lot of education, not only on my platform, but to friends and people around me. So I think each one of us individually has to do our very best to make a conscious decision to change our lives individually, but also to impact and teach the next people who are around us, whoever they may be, friends, co-workers, other people who are Black. So that's one thing. The next thing is, I think we're in a really critical state, but I do think that the pandemic did make a lot of people start their own business. There's still a lot of people who are foolish, who get $1,200 and think that's all the money in the world. I don't even understand it. But I try to use my platforms during that time to tell people, when you get your money, why don't you find 10 friends and y'all put that money together and start some type of business? We're already in a pandemic. You can already see that you can lose your job at the drop of a hat, depending on what field you're in. Why wouldn't you want to go in and start some type of business, whether it's hair, skin products, whatever? Don't take that money and just shop it up, and then you're broke in 2 or 3 days. You need gas money. So it's just a mentality state. And then the third piece I think is very critical to Black people is the mental health part. I'm a big mental health advocate. I'm always preaching it. I have a therapist on standby. I went to a horrible divorce 3 years ago. And I also lost my oldest son 10 years ago. Both of those critical times, I knew I needed help. I know in the Black community, a lot of us were raised and taught, if you get help, you're crazy. No, you're crazy not to get help. Because when you think that these critical things in life happen, that you're supposed to deal with that yourself, that's crazy. Okay, that's why we have the professionals to help you so that you can heal from that and not take that baggage on, because it comes out in some type of way when you don't get professional help. So I'm just a big proponent of that. So a lot of our trauma is still there. We've never ever talked to a professional. We've never sought out anything to unpack some of this stuff. So that does affect you and how you think and how you look at yourself, because if you have no self-worth for yourself, you're certainly not going to have any for the community. But I do use my platforms when I speak, and I have a private Facebook group where I empower women, and I'm always telling them the same thing I'm saying now. And some people are changing the way that they think and changing their life decisions as a result.
Powerful, great stuff. Anybody else want to jump in there before we get to the next question, Simone?
I just wanted to mention about health and eating habits and changing our eating habits, and all the things that the sister just mentioned. When we don't have access to stores, it makes eating healthy really challenging. I just recently moved back to San Francisco, back to the neighborhood I grew up in. That when I grew up, this neighborhood was predominantly Black homeowners, et cetera, and there's no and now it's not, but there's no grocery store over here. And what happens to families that's another state of emergency in our communities. The lack of access to healthy food, the lack of access to grocery stores. I was recently in LA, and I was in Carson, and I wanted to purchase a book, and I was determined to go to a Black-owned bookstore. And so I went to LA, and I had to drive down I can't remember the street, but I drove down the street. It was probably about a mile and a half. And the number of fast food places in that short distance, like, it just made me sick. But that's what's in our communities. And so when we talk about the fight for our communities and within our communities, that I don't know how it all works, but whatever it takes to get a permit, whatever, to open up a fast food joint in our communities, we need to be talking to the people who issue those and say, no, like, we need to fight back against that. And we got to have grocery stores in our community. So I just wanted to mention that, as well as, with the stimulus money. I just, for people who don't have anything or who don't have much, that $1,200 seemed like a lot of money. And again, what you were saying, sis, about the mentality of, oh, I have all this money at one time. Now I can buy something that I've always wanted that I don't really need, but I never had this amount of money to spend it on. So our mentality of how we think about money, and I even had to learn that because, again, my parents grew up broke. My grandfather grew up broke. And I was raised that stuff was important. I wasn't raised to learn. I didn't know anything about investing, the importance of buying property, blah, 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 but appearance. So that's another issue within our Black community of, it's nothing wrong with wanting to look nice and have swag and all that, but what's going on in the inside, right? I don't look the way that I look because I'm trying to cover up for how I'm feeling on the inside. And so I think all of those things are part of the state of emergency within our communities.
Big facts. All I can do is snap my fingers to that. And really it comes down to home ownership. We have to be honest, to push legislation, to do the things that we need to get these restaurants and these liquor stores out of our community. It starts with Black ownership. And I keep talking to people about it. And that's why I get so frustrated about leadership and community organizations that are doing a disservice to our people. I'm on these calls and they talking about housing and what housing development looks like for the Black community. And we got all these people on the call talking about, let's do co-ops. Let's do co-ops. All I keep hearing is these co-op opportunities for Black folks. And I'm like, no, we don't want co-ops. We want Black ownership. We need single Black families to have home ownership so that they can have a real fight with legislative processes, because that's where we're going to get at. You got to be able to pay the taxes. That's why our school board, a lot of things that's happening, we can't maneuver and switch for our Black kids because it's not enough home ownership. And when all of the other coaches are owning homes and they get their vote and they got the power, they make that change because they don't let that stuff happen in their community. But again, they use our community because we don't have the ownership and the leverage our elected officials to make changes. So when you have franchises like McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Burger King and all these people leveraging, our local elected officials, who are they going to go with? The money. We already know what these politics is about. So if I'm the franchise of McDonald's and I'm saying, hey, Mr. Local Supervisor, or, for this district that's predominantly Black residents, I'm going to give you, $100 million. Make sure that I get my stores in your community. Who you think he's going to go for? The people that's, putting that type of money. But if we have the home ownership, the tax dollars, then we got leverage. But when we have no home ownerships in most of our Black communities, in our urban communities, especially living in public housing and different things, we don't have that financial leverage, and that's definitely a big impact to what the problem is. But definitely, we got to get these restaurants out of our community immediately. But again, we had an opportunity yesterday, and this is what I'm talking about. I know Omar came in late. We had an opportunity yesterday. We had the president of the Safeway of Albertsons, 238 stores. That's what we should have been advocating for. Okay, we want 20% of y'all profit from y'all 230 stores, and we want y'all to create a black a grocery store. We lost that opportunity. I think it's still an opportunity there, but we lost the opportunity for what we're asking for, to get a black grocery store, because some of those problems are happening at the Safeway are not happening across the street at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. Why is that? So we got to really look at what's going on and how it's impacting us and how we leverage our political elected officials. But we're going to move on to the next conversation, question of the conversation. And Simone, if you want to go ahead and talk about the education for Black children, Omar is going to be a great person to kick off that, because he's in the education realm. And I know this is an important conversation that we need to have.
I might.
Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Simone.
I keep clicking. Can y'all hear me now? I clicked that button 2 times. So how is education going for our Black children? And Omar, do you want to start on this one?
You got to unmute yourself, Omar.
I always do that. I can start, but definitely want to hear from everyone else. And so, just a little bit of context. For 15 years, I was executive director of a college access program called College Track, and send young people to college. And actually, I pivoted from that work to focus on workforce development. But in terms of education, and I'm a father of 4 myself, and so I think there's tremendous power in education. My mom had me when she was 16 years old, and didn't graduate from high school. And I went on to earn my degrees. And you can see how education, again, is a pathway. But I think in terms of our kids, it's simple, right? Like we got to help sit with our babies and read to them and give them the joy of reading and have that be normalized, because I think if we develop that intellectual curiosity early on, not just about what the traditional, math, reading, and writing is, but about themselves, I just think that is so empowering. I think I have huge issues with the traditional school system. I actually think it's working in the way it was designed to work. And so that's why I don't seek remedies in that, but I do seek remedies and think we have the ability in our own to just really foster a sense of education, and what I would say is I think it exists. So let me say that. I think there's this idea that we don't like education, we don't pursue education, or folks who do pursue education in our community. I don't think that's true. I just think we have to, as parents, as uncles, as aunts, as neighbors, just continue to encourage young people to read and to like math and to know and tie that to their history. And I think developing that intellectual curiosity from early on can lead to college, can lead to entrepreneurship, can lead to starting your own business. I think the sky's the limit. But I think when I see my 7-year-old just sitting there reading without me telling her, I'm like, okay, I've done my job in that realm, right? There's more things to do, but she'll pick up a book and be like, okay, I'll read this. And I frankly don't even care what it is sometimes. If she's turning pages and reading, then that's a start. And so I think we have to do more of that. And again, there are other parents on this call. It is easy to you worked all week. The last thing I want to do is come home sometimes and just turn off the TV, or because it's easier. Put them in front of the TV, then that means me and my wife can sit there and just chill for a minute. But we have to invest. We got to invest in our babies. And I think that there's this long tradition of education. We learned how to read when it was against the law for us to learn how to read. So this is things that is natural to us. And when we try to believe in this notion that Black folks don't like education, history tells us the complete opposite. of that. And so we just have to continue to remind ourselves of that. And I'll end with this. And I think, we see John Henry just mentioned it, but there's a movement right now in San Francisco by some newcomers to really design the school district and the school board in the way they want to see it. And whether we agree with what the school board members did or not, the fact that folks can come in and be like, we want to recall those folks and put in place our own folks to advance our cause. We need to be looking on top of things like that, because I'm all for, like, I will definitely vote for president, but who's my district attorney is more important than who's my president. Who's my school board member is more important than who's my president. Who's my mayor? Who's my supervisor? Those things are way more important. Who's my damn dog catcher is more important. Who's my police chief is more important than who the president is. So when we talk about that connection between education and politics and looking at education on the local level, we have a lot of opportunity. I live in Pinole and West Contra Costa. I just joined the redistricting board because this is the board that's going to decide the school district boundaries. And so the same resources, I want the Richmond resources to equal the El Cerrito resources. And if they create that boundary and let 80 to 80 freeway be the divider between resources that go to El Cerrito versus resources that go to Richmond, then I'm not doing my job.
Powerful, powerful. Anybody else jump in?
A lot of the work that I do is in education as well, doing professional development for educators, and then also programming centered around social and emotional learning with young women specifically. And in doing the work, I was very much in agreement and nodding when Omar said that, the education system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, in terms of what we have come to understand as education, the education system here in America. It was designed to produce, factory workers. That's exactly what education was for. And so when you look at it like you're expecting it to, you have an expectation for it to do something that it was simply not designed to do, then that's where you have to look at where we have to do like an overhaul on what it is. And so, but there is still, for me, because again, I told you in the beginning, I'm optimistic. So I'm still like, hey, how can I still, get in there and drop some seeds where I can, and, lay some breadcrumbs for some of those children to actually find their way out and expose them to the information. Because we love education as Black people. We actually, we taught a lot of the early European, and I won't go into the whole history lesson of Timbuktu and the Moors and all that stuff. I'm not even going to go into all that, but that's the type of history that we have to familiarize our youth with, so that they're not thinking that our history began from us not being allowed to read, but actually us teaching people how to read. That's how we started. Like, if you go back further than when we were taken from our native land, but then fast forward to where we are today and where we move forward. Because again, like I said, I don't like holding on to that trauma and infusing that into who I am today. So what is the future, and how do we propel ourselves forward in education? And one of the biggest things that I love is the African-centered education model, where we actually teach in more to more of the whole child and more of a communal approach, and starting more so from the inside out. Because the very root of the definition of the word educate, a lot of people think it means to teach or to put something in someone. The definition of the word educate means to draw out from within. Right? So if you're drawing out from within in our students, you're teaching them what they have inside of them is already there. And so a lot of the, reading, writing, arithmetic, all that stuff is very important. I wouldn't take it away, but I do feel like there is an imbalance when we're developing our students' academic or IQ and their social and emotional or emotional intelligence, which is their EQ. We have to balance the scales and not go on any extreme than the other, to teach them the problem solving, decision making, self-esteem. Just all of the critical thinking is so rare with these students that I'm serving. When I go in and I ask them a question and they just sit there because they're not being challenged, they're not being pushed. And so I think that programs that really help students to bring out and draw out from within them what's already inside of them are more needed in our communities. And then again, not working in those silos where we're all working independently and separately. I mean, as you all are talking, I'm scribbling. I'm in Georgia. So I'm not even on that side, but I'm still like, okay, how are we gonna connect? Because if what you're doing is here, I don't need to do that. I stay in my lane, let Omar do what Omar does, and that's how ultimately we create that community that's ultimately going to uplift and propel and educate this next generation of Black people.
Deep, very powerful. Ayula, you want to jump in there, or Nikki?
As I think about education, it's piggybacking on what both of you all said. There's the formal education that we're required to provide or have our kids matriculate in, and then there is the informal education, which for us as Black people and community really should be the formal education, where we are investing in not just our children. And this is what I was thinking about as I was listening to you all. It can't be just our children. It has to be our community as a whole, because everyone doesn't have the ability, if we're going to keep it 100, to read to their kids. Everybody doesn't have the ability to help their kids with their homework. Fortunately for me, it wasn't until my kids started taking classes I couldn't even pronounce that I couldn't help them, but I also had the means to provide them with tutors. So the education component of our children is very, very complex. And, I think I'm a former teacher. I taught for 8 years. Why did I leave teaching? Because I couldn't afford to stay being a teacher. That's another important part. I would go back to teaching in a heartbeat, but I literally can't afford to be a teacher. And the so that's a problem. How are we going to get good teachers who are committed to our children, who understand that we have to teach to the whole child, all the way up, understanding everybody doesn't learn the same. So guess what? As a teacher, I can't teach the same. My approach to education was not that they need to get with my program. I need to learn my students, and I need to learn their learning styles, and I need to be the chameleon who can teach to everybody's learning style. So it is very complex. I've seen firsthand what Omar is speaking to, the disparity. When I raised my last 3 kids in Mill Valley, and I was blown away when, you go to back to school night and they're talking about the availability of textbooks, and the kids get 2 sets of textbooks, one to stay at school and one to take it home, because they're concerned about them lugging their textbooks back and forth. And if you're from a home where you have 2 homes, and we'll give you a 3rd set of textbooks. And I was thinking, I taught in districts where we didn't even have enough textbooks for the classroom. We're in there at Old Dark 30 making copies so everybody can have access to the education. The disparity, and the kids that grow up in, I know you're not from here, T, but Mill Valley is one of the wealthiest, is in one of the wealthiest counties in California. And there is a city in Marin County, Marin City, which is the polar opposite in terms of economics than Mill Valley. But the kids that are Black and brown kids, primarily Black in Marin City, go K through 8 there, and then they come to Mill Valley to go to high school. And that's a hot mess. And so there's so many issues within education and educating our children. Parents not knowing what their rights, their responsibilities, but what are their rights? Our kids were profiled. Of course, when we got to Mill Valley, here I come with my 3 Black kids in this school district that's probably 90% white and super wealthy, and how my kids were treated, and how they learned quickly that, oh no, Ayula will show up to the school, and how many parents just don't know. How many parents trust that the school district is educating their kids? It's just, we can just go on and on and on. But as a community, after school programs, You know, there are different ethnicities, if we talk about different cultures, who have schools. There's Jewish schools, and there's, you know, just different schools, Chinese schools, where they go to in addition to going to regular school. And so I think that's another aspect of our community that we can work on, and we can grow. And also just loving on those babies, because they come from, oftentimes there's so much going on. I was running an after school a tutorial program at one of the schools on the Hill in Bayview, and just the amount of and this was an elementary school, and the amount of trauma that those babies were exposed to just by virtue of where they live. You know, I understood that I had to have snacks in my classrooms all the time. I'm going to have healthy snacks, and I'm going to have water, because they're coming to school hungry. And sometimes they're coming to school sleepy, because gunshots kept them up all night. And so teaching is important. Our babies are important, but to us, clearly not to this country, because if it was, they would pay teachers more, and I would still be teaching.
Powerful. Nikki, you want to go ahead and jump in there?
My heart has been beating so hard. I just want to give honor to all the educators. My mother was an educator. She's still alive, but she retired as an educator for the Las Vegas school district. And she was also my teacher, and she was a flight attendant for almost 30 years. So she substituted. She would get off work at noon, come teach an art class. She taught at a high school. So I understand the importance of education in the Black community. I don't have any children, but I occupy a lot of space on Clubhouse with hundreds to thousands of parents who talk about the quality of teachers in the urban communities. We talk about course and curriculum that is being written, and how our Black children are being inserted into classrooms where they can't delineate between Black history and American history, not knowing that there is a huge parallel between Black history being American history. We talk about just readiness skills that our children are lacking, because we have parents, whether they're in single parent homes or, you know, with both parents in the house, they're working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. They're not able to invest a lot of time, you know, because they have their own thing going on. So they're relying on the neighbor to take care of their children as well. We have a lot of latchkey kids. I was a latchkey kid, but I knew that I had friends' homes that I can go to get the same love and attention that my parents weren't able to give me just in the interest of time. We talk about, you know, putting so much pressure on children also in high school to go to college when that may not be their ministry. You know, it's important for us to have serious conversations when they become of age about what their interests are, about financial literacy, about what debt looks like when you go into college and when you come out of college. You know, the narrative has been painted for Black people that we can't get scholarships, that we don't have the amount of intellect that could be competitive with Ivy League schools. It's important for us to know that our children can be something without a college degree if they choose to, you know, pick up a trade or go to vocational school, entrepreneurship. There's never a wrong time to talk about the right thing with our children. So those are a lot of the conversations that I'm having with parents. And just to echo, I know this is an echo chamber, but it's a beautiful echo chamber of just extending love and grace to families, because it truly takes a village. My parents did not raise me on their own. It took educators, it took strangers, it took people in the grocery store who saw me with a book in the cart and say, "What are you reading over there?" I believe Omar said, when we show an intellectual interest in these things, then you can draw the parallel of, you know, the warriors and the wanderers. And we want all of our babies to be warriors and not wanderers in this world.
Deep. Simone, you want to jump in there?
Yeah. And I'm actually going to come from a little different perspective. So I moved from Texas. I've only been in Arizona for 2 years. And the school district here, my children go to a predominantly Caucasian school. And I had to learn my child as a student. I'm that parent. You call me, you have my number, don't email, call me, let me know if my children, you know, did anything, let me know if you need anything from me, because I'm a single mom of 4 babies. So I'm like, okay, I always, every year, I don't care who it is, I always give my cell phone number to any teacher, because don't email me. I'm not going to get it. I'm at work. So just call me. And I started realizing after my children returned back from the pandemic, my youngest daughter, her teacher and my daughter, all my children, they are well behaved. I'm very strict on them at home. But after they returned to school after pandemic, her teacher every day, such and such did this. She's doing this. She's doing this. And I'm the type of parent, I'm like, okay, Skylee, you grounded. You can't do anything. Your school is, calling, telling me all these negative things that you're doing. So I had to really learn my child as a student. And I said all of this is because, first and foremost, they labeled my child something that she was not doing. I remember, and this is where I took the initiative to really step in, other than listening to this teacher telling me every week that my child is not listening in her class. We did something, and she did something at home, and she commented, "Oh, it's because I have a behavioral problem." I'm sorry, because you have a what? She said, "It's because I have a behavioral problem. That's why I did that." I said, "Skylee, who told you that?" "Oh," she said, "my teacher told me that, and they put me in behavioral classes, and I have to sit out of class for this amount of time." And I said, hold on. No one made me aware that you had labeled my child as having behavior problems. You have taken her out of class and put her in a behavioral class. So now you're labeling my child as a behavioral problem child, when it's really stemming from the fact from your own perception of my child. My child is 10 years old. She's about 5'4", real lanky, skinny. She's a bit bigger than all the students, but they pick on her. And I always tell Skylee, just come home and tell me, I'll handle it when I get there. But for some reason, they always reflect it back on my daughter. So I've been having some issues when it comes to the education process by having children in the city, because I actually came to Arizona. My corporate job moved me here. So my corporate job moved me here, so I want to be close to my job. It's 5 minutes away. So we're in a predominantly Caucasian education system, and it's been very difficult on my children, not when it comes to the education part, but when it's coming to the self-esteem, when it's coming to being labeled as things that no other district has ever said until we came here. So that when it comes to education, and I know someone spoke on that earlier, we have to start teaching problem solving ethics when it comes to these children. But this is something new for me, and something that I'm having to get adjusted to, in understanding my student and being able to stand up for my rights. Because when you have a school district, like we talked about earlier, we automatically think that the leaders have more power than us, but they don't. Immediately, I told them to take my daughter out of that class. Do not send my daughter out of that class. If there's any other issue, you need to get in contact with me and let me know. Since my daughter has been out of that behavior class, there has not been any issues. But you're putting in her head every week she has a behavioral problem. She doesn't. You're damaging her self-esteem. So this is a very sensitive topic for me, because this is actually what I'm going through when it comes to my children now, and being a single mom and trying to keep your children educated, which is not fine. My children love school. They're one of those students that will pick up and read a book, but it's really damaging on their self-esteem. It really is, going to a school that is predominantly white, but this is the best this is the best school district in Arizona, though. So
Simone,
it's kind of like a situation.
I want to suggest, and we can talk offline if you want. I'd be more than happy to support you in what you're dealing with the school district. But I also want to say, ask to see your daughter's cum file, because what are they documenting? Her cumulative file. You want to know what we're documenting, and we could talk about it offline, but I want to say that you have a right to see their files all the time. And I absolutely had things removed from my son's CUNY file because, you know, a whole incident happens and then they put one blurb on it they document it in one blurb that doesn't act, you know, and that follows them everywhere. And nowadays it can impact college applications. So, and a lot of parents don't necessarily know that, but I'm happy if you need support. I'm happy to. I will go to war with school districts behind our babies.
I do, and that's the strange thing. And yes, I definitely want to talk to you when we get offline. That's the strange thing. When I confronted the principal of that, they don't have any record of her having any disciplinary actions. It's literally her teacher. It's just a teacher. I called. I said, "Yo, I've noticed that Skyly's been getting in trouble." Her teacher pulled up. She said, the principal pulled up. She said, "No, Skyly is a great student. We don't have any record of her doing any of these things." I had to forward her all of the emails and the text messages that I had from her teacher, and she immediately called a meeting with the teacher, and that's when I had requested for all of that stuff to stop, because why is it only you recognizing this, but the rest of the school is not? So I definitely want to talk to you about it, because I feel like there should still be something else done.
And that's a perfect segue to, you know, the issues that we continue to address. The intersections continue to cross. There's an equity issue. So when we talk about education in America for our Black kids, it's a curriculum change. There's a reform that needs to happen. Okay, we need culturally competent teachers who can live in the cities that they work in that are predominantly of color, so that they can have an opportunity to give our kids that quality of education. And then this labeling thing is very important, because even here in the Bay Area and across this nation, too many of our kids are being, quote unquote, having special needs, or they need Ritalin because they have ADHD. And a lot of it comes from, like Ayula said, the things that they deal with in the community. Some of the issues may be from coming from home, and how do we fix it? But I know it's a big complaint from our teachers. It's a big complaint from our wellness providers. This equity, this money. And when we talk about reparations and different things, these are the conversations that we really need to talk about. What does reparations really look like? And I think a lot of times we kind of miss that mark. And we know that there's a financial gap and wealth. And I think that's what Omar was touching in. The economical issues that impact the Black and brown community is a big part of why we're doing so bad when it comes to in all areas of our statistics. And definitely, we got to have a real conversation when we start talking about reparations and this economical power that we need. And it all starts with that disparity in wealth. You know, here in California, they invest more money to lock people up than to invest that money into education and healing. We'll pay $90,000 to $100,000 a year to house somebody when we could be using those dollars to help educate. And I think we teach our kids too many lies. And that's why I think the curriculum needs to be changed, because they're not getting true history. And it's a lot of lies, and it's a lot of dummy down. And when you come into that type of educational realm and that environment, to be told false information and not really seeing. I was watching something, and the guy was asking a group of Black kids, when was the first time you seen a Black male teacher? And I think every kid said it was like either in 8th grade or 9th grade, the first time. And that's a problem. We had our brother Terrence on here from Time Done last week. He is a brother that is very sharp, articulate, have an engineering degree, but he can't get in the classroom and teach, you know, our young people because of a felony that he had from years ago. And how the criminal justice system is also playing in some of these legislative laws that are put in place that are enabling our people to get involved, to make the change, to really impact our young people. And I think we do need to see more Black teachers, and to see more Black teachers is going to definitely be a conversation about pay, the pay equity and reparations. What does that look like to get our you know, people of color into these classrooms, and how do we get man in the classroom? I hear T and a couple of people, and a lot of work is being done with the women of our community. And I hear a lot of organizations, they're doing a lot for Black women, and no knock to that. But when are we going to invest into our young Black males because that's when you start looking at the educational number. There's a big gap when it comes to how fast our Black females and brown females are selling. But when it comes to the Black male, that margin is very, very divided. And how do we promote the education for our young Black males and get more Black male teachers involved in education? Because I think that definitely makes a impact to our young males in the community, how we deal with it. But we know the system was set up and designed to keep our Black males out of the house, out of the community, out of our schools. And I think that's another thing that we really got to look into when we talk about the state of Black America. How do we re-engage and invest in the Black males to get them to a point where they're uplifted and they're supported? There's a big thing that Goldman Sachs, they put about $900 billion into Black women entrepreneurship and advancement of Black women. But we didn't see that same type of investment for none of the corporations when it came to Black males in America. And I think that's another conversation that we have to have coming up, because again, when these organizations and these corporations are investing in one side, it is still continued to divide our communities. And how do we overcome that? And we're getting hit left and right with these same topics that's coming back. And as we get into the housing, the redlining, you look at what's going on in this country right now. Like T said earlier about voter suppression across this country, we are reversing and going back into the old Jim Crow laws and the different things. Like history is repeating itself again in a different way. And we got to identify this in our state of the Black America crisis and emergency. Because if we don't get involved and we don't have these conversations and we don't start putting these think tanks together and making sure that we are unifying our community in a positive way to impact us, we are headed in the road of destruction. And it definitely is going to start with finances. I'm seeing more and more cases coming out of this pandemic that's going to impact our Black community even more. We got a sister coming on this Thursday, and also we're going to have a conversation about this Reinvestment Act and some of the things that went on to pay for our seniors and some of the people in the community from housing during this COVID, and how this Senate bill was lifted about evictions, and how our Black people in our communities are about to get hit dramatically. And that's going to be another stress on the community, because people are now coming to the end of that moratorium when it comes for rent assistance and mortgage assistance. And we're going to have a big population of more Black people who are going to be impacted by housing and homelessness. And even some of our Black landlords who are homeowners losing their properties because of the lack of monies coming in. And that also puts an impact on our Black economic powers moving forward. So that's something that we gotta hone into. But we at the halfway mark here. We got to get out of here. But I want to just hone in on two things: the criminal justice system towards Blacks in America, and then how do we all fix this Black state of America from you all opinion. So I just want to throw those two things out there, because the criminal justice system is really impacting the GDP. Terrence came on last week talking about time done. We got 3.5 million Californians who can't get jobs and help the tax purposes and to help the GDP and the growth of businesses when they're being railroaded because of their criminal background. They've done their time, they've made their change, they off parole. But again, the decisions that they made are impacting them now. That's also impacting the economic power of Black America. So want to throw that out there. What can we do to fix the state of Black America? And then this criminal justice towards our Black America, y'all can just jump in there, and then we'll wind it down from there.
Before I answer, I just want to say this real quick before we move on to this subject, because it would be so remiss of me, and I would be in a whole lot of trouble if I didn't shout out two of my kids are educators. Actually, 3 of my 5 kids are educators. My oldest daughter works with autistic children and their families, providing services and supporting them in schools. My oldest son is a 3rd grade teacher in Antioch, and my middle daughter just finished her 1st year of teaching 1st grade in New Orleans. So shout out to my kids that are teachers.
Definitely, we got to get those teachers some love. Go ahead, Kat.
Okay. All right. So first, for the criminal justice system, I think we have to start with things that we can get to easily. A lot of times you can't get to the politicians, but you do have a lot of Black churches in these neighborhoods, on these corners. I think the people need to start putting pressure on the Black churches to because they have power, because they actually sit at these boards with a lot of these elected officials to do more in these communities to help the community. Instead of just being there on Sundays and preaching and collecting money, I do think that that's one thing that could be used immediately. You know, groups could go to these pastors in these churches and demand that you step up for this community other than what you're doing on Sunday. And then number two, and you know, which that intertwines with the legal system and everything else. But number two, I do think that for the education system, I heard you talking about how it wasn't that many Black males, and it isn't. And that's just across America. But I think that the retired educators and the current educators need to use like what you're doing now, video. You know, that's one thing we have as Black people as our leverages. We can all create platforms and we can do videos, and we can make those videos available for Black boys and Black girls to see, because every educator that is retired or is still working now, they know what the problems are. They can sit up with their phone and record different teaching lessons that parents can access to teach their kids at home. Yeah, you may have to do it free or you can charge a small fee, but that's us helping each other because they can't shut down the internet. We have access to the internet. So that's one way, like your platform, we're getting information across. We just need to connect the dots and get the information across. And for you, Queen, who had the problem with your daughter, I do a lot of self-love coaching for men, women, and children. I have an I Love Me hoodie and t-shirt gear where we just pour into people and let them know your value. There's only one you on the planet and you have worth. And I just get real and talk to kids when I go talk to them, because I grew up with low self-esteem. I went to an all Black school that had no funding, and in the last 2 years, mostly white school. So I've seen both sides. So I can relate to all of those conversations. And I'm a registered nurse. So I've seen a whole lot of stuff outside of what we're talking about today. And the last point I want to make quickly is that, yeah, we shouldn't keep pushing all these kids to go to college. You know, we need to be pushing more entrepreneurial type things, which means trades. You know, there are people that are making more money sometimes doing these trades than people are making with degrees. I know some beauticians, some barbers who are making 6 figures. They have developed their own products. They're making 6 figures, and they went to school for 6 months. I know some nail technicians that are making 6 figures. They've created their own nail polishes. They do nails to wealthy people. So there are things that you can do with a 6-month trade, and you can maximize that income depending on where you want to go in that business. But everybody should not be pushed toward a college education, because sometimes they don't even get hired for jobs. So entrepreneurship is the way we really should be pushing our kids more so than this broken education system.
Definitely. Miss T, you want to jump in there?
And something happened with my device, and I clocked out and clocked back in. So I want to make sure I didn't miss. Could you restate the question? I can't hear you. You're muted.
How is the criminal justice system towards Blacks in America, and then what can we do together to fix the Black state in America? Those are the 2 questions.
Okay, perfect. So, are you all familiar with the book, The Push Out by Monique Morrison?
No, I haven't heard it.
So the Push Out talks about like how the education system in conjunction with, I guess, the criminal justice system is basically pushing out not just Black girls, but she focuses on Black girls. That's her focus. And so she's talking about how they're being marginalized and pushed out of the education system and into the criminal justice system. And we're seeing like the numbers going up at alarming rates of our Black girls in the criminal justice system right now. And she gives a lot of facts and statistics and data behind that idea. And that was a conversation that I was having a number of years ago, just saying, hey, you know, we have to make sure that we're balancing the scale. So again, like I said, when we talk about our lanes and, you know, staying in our lanes, if I'm working with these girls, somebody's got to also be out here working with these boys as well, so that we're not literally feeding this criminal justice system, and then also giving them those skills that really that are, you know, proven to reduce recidivism, because that's the biggest thing. Because if I put you in timeout, right? If I put a child in timeout, they don't know why they went into timeout, or maybe they do, but we're not addressing what's causing this behavior. We're not giving them the tools that they need to actually change that mindset around it, or get the resources, or teach them a different way to acquire those resources. Then they're going to constantly reoffend. And so it goes back to, it's going to always go back to mindset for me. You know, what are we doing to address the mindset so that we're not ultimately feeding the beast?
I think that's a touchy topic, but I know we get short on time, so I'm gonna lead here because I believe too, when we send these young people back and these adults back to a community that's full of poison, you know, that plays a big role on it as well. Because we get these kids where they don't have drugs in their system, they locked up, it's a timeout. We can start waking up the level of consciousness, but once we send them back to the community and you're going back to the same pitfall of crime, violence, how do you get out of that cycle? Yeah, I mean, you have to build up a strong mindset. But again, when you stand on the corner and there's 50 people smoking weed, promoting negativity all the day, and you're trying to get that positive mind chain to move, it's a hard, daunting task. But we have to do something, and it starts with, like you said, that interaction. So I do agree with you there. But it is a challenge for these young people. I see them coming into the community, and I'm like, why are you back? And it's like, hey, I went to this organization you guys told me to, and they don't have any jobs. You guys said they had opportunities, they don't have it. So again, as community, organizations, leaders, how do we stand on our toes on what we say we have for these people that's coming home, coming out of these situations, so that they actually get that pathway of success? Because it does us no good if we say, hey, go to this nonprofit, go to this community organization, they got a job, they go give you the resources, and they go get you started on entrepreneurship or vocational, and they come there and it's like, I can't get in the program. Oh, you got a deadline. Oh, it's not an opportunity right now. Let me get back to you. And we don't follow up. It's still a disservice. So again, I'm looking at the lens of all the way around, and what I see is a lot of confusion, a lot of disorganization, and we're really not set up the way that we're selling. And this is why I get, you know, so frustrated when it comes to data, especially with our nonprofit organizations. Anybody can put numbers out there to make it look good, right? I can grab all of the kids from Iula's Mill Valley School, where they're #1 in the nation, and say, hey, I'm mentoring all of these great kids, and my numbers look great. But we got kids in these projects, in these urban communities. That's where the real work is. I want to hear those success stories. How many of these kids you could actually turn that live in a project, dealing with the gun violence and showing up? And that's why it's certain organizations that I really commend. 100% College Prep is one of them, because they working with these kids who live in these communities where it's a challenge. And then next thing you know, they're turning these kids around and they're getting into college. I respect that work. But I could go to Mill Valley and grab 50 kids and go, hey, I got a wonderful program. All my kids is honor students. The real work is in the trenches with our people, and you know, we got to definitely focus in on that. But it's a daunting job. It's not going to stop, but we got to continue the conversation to make the impact. But we got to do a little bit more. And I think you hit on it earlier, and a couple of you, we need Saturday school. We're going to have to just really put our kids in a Saturday school to really educate them on our history, financial, and I think these other topics that we're talking about when it comes to vocational school and mental health and that nature, because it is a responsibility of our mental health professionals. We all have a role to play when it comes to talking to these kids about mental health and things of that nature. But again, I hold the professionals accountable. They're the ones that go to school. They have the tools in the toolbox to deal with a lot of that stuff. And a lot of times they're not stepping up, and they always want to get mad and say, you know, it's not my responsibility. And I'm like, yeah, it is. You know, we hold them accountable. Yeah, you can't force nobody to get mental health. We understand that. But how do we, in these think tanks, find a way to really access our kids and people in the community? And I think that's a little bit more of the conversation that we need to be having. And how do we talk to our young people about their anger, fear, and pain, and get them to open up? And it starts with people like you all coming on here, being vulnerable, being open, saying that there is an issue, there is a problem, mental health is okay. But how do we get our influencers? How do we get our rappers? How do we get our entertainers? How do we get our elected officials? How do we get our community leaders? How do we get our church leaders to say mental health is real and not say it's Satan, the devil going to get you and all of this stuff? So I don't know, but Nikki, go ahead and jump in there, and then Simone, Iula, whoever want to go out there. But we got about 15 minutes left.
Yeah, sure. What I will say is, so I'm part of a group on Clubhouse, and we had a room not too long ago about the school prison to pipeline. And I think it's important for us to really look at the zero tolerance policies and the policing policies that we have in some of these school systems, because our Black children are assigned this narrative that there's misplaced anger, that they don't respond well to disciplinary action and corrective action. And we clearly know that's not the case. When they feel attacked, again, what they have to deal with outside of the classroom, they are not emotionally intelligent enough to know how to shut that off in the classroom. So I believe, as Ayula said earlier today, we're just building, I'm sorry, it may have been T, we're just building trauma on top of trauma. So there's continuous layers that we have to continue to peel back. But if we are not allowing our students to respond naturally and organically to things that are happening in the classroom without fear of retaliation, without fear of constantly being put on an embarrassment pedestal in front of other students in the classroom based on race and gender, to be honest, because there's a gender war between our Black boys and our Black girls in elementary school, high school, and even college right now. We really have to start paying attention to that, because they're coming home and not able to have conversations with their parents, their caregivers, anyone who was taking care of them in this world, to say, this is what I experienced in school today. There was a class that, there was a news article that we read a couple of weeks ago about a student who stood up for a Black student who stood up for another Black student. And the teacher responded, oh, because I thought someone who had a 54 in my class said something. How is a 7th grader supposed to internalize that when she has been embarrassed in front of the entire classroom for sticking up for another Black student who was embarrassed by the same non-melanated teacher? So that's what I'm talking about. We have to understand what these policies are. And I'm not a teacher, but I love children. I love students. I love anyone who is growing up in this world and having to deal with the things that we as adults are trying to compartmentalize right now. But it absolutely starts with education and understanding what those policies look like that affect our Black children.
Wow, that's deep. I even read an article about the young sister, I don't know where it was, maybe it was Atlanta or Alabama, had to cut her hair before a softball game. I mean, like these policies is crazy. And, they are intentionally, doing things, like you said, to discipline our kids. When you look at the educational disciplinaries that take place with our young people, it is like 5 to 10 to 1 sometimes. Little things these kids are being expelled and suspended for. And it's just sad. But before I pass it to Simone, Nikki, because I know you like me a little radical a little bit. When we talk about this pro-Black thing, and I always tell people I'm pro-Black, I'm not anti anybody else, but I love my people. And we talked about this earlier about our people. What does that pro-Black looks like to you all? Because I'm having an issue with this pro-Black thing. And, because like you said earlier, a lot of us are screaming pro-Black and we're Black this. But then when you look at our Black people who are saying they're pro-Black, you look at their business models, you look at some of the things that they're about, it's not so pro-Black, right? You look at some of these nonprofits, they say they pro-Black and the entire board is white. Or you look at their businesses and all of their business leadership are white. But sometimes these people are so pro-Black, and I'm confused. So I just want to make sure that I'm not losing touch about this pro-Black thing, because I love my people. I will spend my every dollar with my people or my Latin people before anybody else. I do my best to do that. But we have this pro-Black thing that's going around, and people, I'm pro-Black, I love my people, I'm this. But then when you look at their business models, you look at what they do, it's not so pro-Black. And I think that's a confusion too in the community. Because I think what leadership is about, leading by example. And I always say that. And leadership looks like standing up when things aren't so great. Because typically in our community, our leaders like to show up and do the cameos, and when the news is there, and they accept all the praise. But when things are going wrong or things are not going good, our leaders hide. You know what I mean? And I think I just wanted to ask that to you, because I know how you feel about a lot of this stuff, but we have this and it's a problem. I'm tired of these people talking about I'm pro-Black, I love my people, I'm doing this. And then you look at their business models, you look how they move, and they're not so pro-Black. How do we address that? How do we deal with that in our community?
I think you're going to get 2 answers from different people. And I think we just have to acknowledge that based on someone's experiences, how they feel. I don't knock anyone for, saying that they're pro-Black, but I do knock someone who doesn't understand what that actually means and what that looks like. For me, I will always go against the grain. People call me a radical. People say you have a very unpopular opinion. My opinion is my opinion. It's the way that I've lived my life. I've lived in a world where self-acceptance is in my nature, but I'm also always going to be for my Black people. I think that Black people are absolutely the smartest, most intelligent, most nurturing and giving by nature because of our lineage of people in the world. And I just can't see myself asking for advice or support or any supplemental resources from someone white, because I am trying to be somewhat censored on here, honestly, but I want Black people to love Black people and to support Black people. I don't want us to always feel like because we have to be in so close proximity to whiteness because they are the benchmark, that's what we have to attach to ourselves in order to have a voice to be amplified. Absolutely not. We should be able to stand on our own as a Black community and not need any white media to tell our stories for us, any Black restaurants to highlight our meals, anything like that. So for me, I am absolutely pro-Black. I will always be for my Black people, and I will never need anyone non-melanated to support me or come to me and for me for anything. I will never look for that again. And to me, that is absolutely what pro-Black is, because everyone in our Black community has something to contribute and something to offer. Again, I've had debates about this before, and I know we don't have a lot of time, and I don't ever expect anyone to think like you and I, but I think we just have to get to a place where we have heavily relied on white people so much for power, but white people hold the power, Black people are the power. And that's where those two interconnect for me.
So what you talk about is the real racism, because I think our people don't understand what racism is. So when I hear these stupid comments of Black people are racist, the people with the power is where the racism come in. They have the authority to make change and policy, and that's where the systemic racism comes from. Because I think it's an education process too, that we need to educate our people about racism. What does it look like? Because it is a race and there is competition, and I think we get our cues kind of skewed when we're talking about racism, what that really looks like, especially when we talk about systemic racism and white power and not being able to deal with things when it comes to what does that really look like? Because people use words and they don't really understand. I think that's something that we do definitely need to also hone in. What does this racism really looks like? And when we're talking about equality, and it's no equality in the race. And I think that's why I'm big on equity and inclusion and things of that nature. But when it comes to equality in a race, there is no equality. And we have to be true and honest about that in the Black community. So I thank you for saying that. I think it's real. And that's just something that we gotta touch on too, because I think that's real important. I'm all for all people, and I think there's a role and a place, for our allies. But I also believe, when it comes to that model, what does that model look like for the community? Because that is our vision. We are a people that see, we live about what we see, and if you don't show that to the community, how else will we ever be able to, put that together in real terms and actually tangibilize it? And so I think that's important. But Simone, you want to jump in there and give your information on that?
Look, I always have the unpopular opinion as well. So I'm one of those people, I don't know, and I'm gonna just be blunt and honest. I'm not one of those label type of people. I'm kind of a do what's right. I'm a, maybe I want to say, I don't know a word for a people advocate. I'm not quite sure. So I can't say that I am pro-Black or not, because if we go by her definition of not needing the help of the quote unquote white man for any assistance, then I don't fall into that category. For when it comes to being pro-Black, there was a time where I did need government assistance. Guess where that came from? Quote unquote white men. And even with my continuing career, it has elevated to where the fact that I'm not needing any government assistance, but other avenues in my life. For an example, creating the first pageant in Chandler, Arizona, as a Black woman, I needed the assistance of quote unquote the white man. So I don't know that I don't know. That's always been a difficult topic for me, because I could kind of see it when it comes to both ways. Like, I hear you when you say pro-Black, but am I not pro-Black if I am standing for what is right when it comes to racism? But because I feel the nature to see an obligation to help strengthen my career, that counsels me out as being pro-Black. So that's we kind of have to, but that's where you have to have a mindset. Like you said earlier, everyone's not going to agree with your opinion, but I do want to raise the attention to those who feel like me. If you do have a business and you are needing, quote unquote, the white man, and you are a type of person that also will get down and dirty in your community, that doesn't dismiss you as being pro-Black. I am for my people, but the avenue that I am taking in my life right now, my Black community doesn't have the education portion of what I'm trying to do in my community. So therefore, it got picked up by, quote unquote, the white man. So that's kind of how my life has been. You know, every time I elevate, that's kind of how it has been. So I also want to just speak to those who are kind of like me. Sometimes we are going to need that help, but that does not dismiss you as a pro-Black person. If you know deep down in your heart, you're educating your children, you're educating your family, you're doing what you're needing to do to make sure that you're standing up for what is right when it comes to our community. So I'm just looking at it from another perspective.
I just think it's more the model thing. I'm not saying that, you know, for me, the pro-Black thing is not that you have whites or others supporting you. I think it's more the model. You get what I'm saying? I think I'm honing in when we're so pro-Black, but then if you look at the entire model that we represent, it doesn't represent Blackness. You get what I'm saying? And I think that's where I'm more.
Don't be so pro-Black that you miss the opportunity to get into the crevices to where we're establishing opportunities for more Black people. We just had our first Black city councilwoman in the city of Chandler, who I am mentoring under. So if it wasn't for her paving the way to get into these crevices and knowing how to mingle with these people, I'm gonna just say how it is, who they have taught to me possibly of mentoring under somebody because they can see me being the next city council person. I have to be a chameleon. So that's why I'm saying I don't want that to be lost in translation, because you do have the opportunity to go on, you know, to the other side, that is meaning that you know you're not pro-Black, because it's going to take like our first Black city council woman. She had to get it out the mud in order to get in her position. And guess what? Now that I'm in close connect to her, now it's like, oh dang, we can be city council people. Which, you know, it starts to be a trickling effect. And I kid you not, I just hosted a political campaign in front of the mayor, the vice mayor, and all these political women as the only Black woman in the room. So it's just like you know, don't be so. Sometimes we can be a little too pro-Black that we're missing opportunities in the real agenda of how we need more leaders to look like us. And if I have that mentality, then I'm going to miss my opportunity to be in that same position. So that's the side that I'm looking at it.
I completely agree with that. I just say one thing and I'll digress. I think it also depends on your path. For me, I'm an entrepreneur, so I have a lot more autonomy and freedom to say some things that other people may not be able to say, you know, because we are still working in corporate America or whatever the case may be. So for me, it's a lot easier for me to kind of stand by that when there is a structure that people are still working underneath, and there may be people who are non-melanated who can support you in matriculation of going to the next step. But I completely agree. But for me, I'm thankful enough to be able to say that, and not a lot of people are able to, but I'm able to because I put myself in a position to do so. But I completely agree with you, Simone. Yeah.
And it's always been allies there. I just when I said, like, I look at the entire business model for me, and that's just my thing. And to uplift our people, we have to make sure that we represent what we're promoting. That's more of where I'm trying to hone in. But Miss T, I know it's getting late because you're in Atlanta, right?
Yes, I am.
What does that pro-Black look like in Atlanta, where it's a predominantly or 50-50 Black residents? with the voter suppression coming down up there and followed by Florida. What do you see far as out there? Because I know it's more Black, and here in the Bay Area we more diverse, so the population of Black is very small. So when we're speaking about a lot of these disparities and issues, it's really impacting us because the number of Black residents here is so small. We're so diverse out here. But now when we shift to you in Atlanta, where there's predominantly Black residents, what are you seeing when it comes to this pro-Blackness, Black support? What are you seeing out there?
Yes, it's very interesting to me. I have a colleague that I work with that's out there, and to hear the difference between, when she comes here and she's like, oh my God, like this is so different. I'm like, yeah, this is just a Tuesday for us, But before I do touch on it, I did want to say just one thing about the last topic that we were discussing, if you don't mind. When we talked about, being pro-Black and things like that, and what does that mean and what does that look like? The biggest thing is for me is grace, just granting our people grace. And so, Simone, I appreciate you sharing your perspective, even though it was a, like you said, a not so popular perspective at times, but there are people who may not feel comfortable enough to share their perspective and may leave a conversation feeling like, oh, they don't support me, or they don't think that I am capable, or I'm pro-Black, or where I do identify as pro-Black, but I just hadn't had anyone to educate me on this, or, I may feel alienated or isolated because I don't feel like I can come to you, because when I hear you talking about it, it's like, oh, no, we don't do this, or, and we, like I said earlier, we can tend to be a very proud people. And that can kind of get in the way of us forming some bonds and some bridges in our community, ultimately, because we don't grant our people enough grace. So that would be my point to that. I had to circle back to that.
So in Atlanta, for the Black support, just as far as Black businesses, I know it's a lot of them. Do you feel like, because it is heavy populated with Blacks, that there is more support? Because out here in the West Coast, I don't see a lot of support. It's a lot of silos. Everybody's doing their own thing. But when I do travel to the South, I got family in Florida, different places, it is a Black unity. Like, Black folks do this stuff. But how do we get this across the nation? Because there's a lot of division, and a part of it is because some of the areas that people are, it is so much diversity and things of that nature. But how do we get this movement to unify and electrify our people in a way that we can start coming together to work with each other? And I think Ayoola said it earlier, it's about trust. A lot of it is we've been damaged so much, we don't even trust to spend money with each other. We don't trust the advice. Somebody tell you something, let me go read up the newspaper and make sure what they saying is true. How do we just be like, hey, this is a Black sister giving me some gems, let's take it and run with it? What I mean?
Well, I research anything, I don't care what color your skin is. You run it by me, I'm gonna go double check, fact check. But I think that when it comes to really spreading it, so yes, I do see a lot of support here. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but there is a lot. There's just this feeling here in Atlanta that we get when we go in and we support Black businesses. Like, we literally walk into a place and we'll say, is this establishment Black owned? And you have to ask, because there are, other cultures that are pretending they are Black owned, but they are truly not. And so we have like a whole, there's a Buy Black movement here. There's so many different groups that are working to support the Black communities here. But one of the things that is important when it comes to supporting Black businesses and making sure that we thrive and survive is to not give up on a business because you had a bad experience. So if I go to a business and I get in there and I have a bad experience, instead of saying, oh, I'm not going back there anymore, I'm the one that's gonna say, hey, let me talk to a manager, let me talk to the owner to let them know what my experience was like, so that they have an opportunity to step up to increase the quality of service, the quality of the product, or whatever it is, so that they can thrive for a long time and survive. And then making sure that we're in the Jewish community. I saw this video, and I believe it was the Jewish community, where there was literally a training video that went out to their people, teaching them how to keep their money in the community. And this was something that's like, like this is a thing. It's not like you talked about communication and us having like a central point of communication. This is like their central point. And I couldn't quote where it came from and how it was circulated, but this was, you know, and I watched that video and I listened, and it said, I don't care if the markup is 25% higher than a competitor, you spend that money in your community. And that's what we have to have a system for how we grow community, how we grow these businesses in the Black community. We have to have a system for all of it, for education, for whatever, but specifically with this economics, we have to have a system. We have to all be speaking the same language, and then have a code to kind of lift each other up and give each other grace in that. So that would be my feedback on how we can expand
that's powerful. I think that's powerful because that is the problem. You know, we go to a Black business. Oh, y'all $10 higher than Applebee's. I'm just gonna go down there at Applebee's. I can get a drink, or I can go here and get the same product you're selling on Amazon for $10 cheap. But they don't understand that. Yeah, they have the capacity. Yes. They have where they can buy in bulk. So we got to learn to understand when this person is charging a little bit more for this knitted hat or this whatever, it's because they're building capacity till they can get to the point of Amazon to lower the prices. But it is an education process. I mean, I see it, and that's one of my frustrations. And again, it goes back to them people that I get tired of hearing about their 25, 30 years they've been doing this, and then you go in there and we got nothing. If I want to walk in here as a new business owner, where's our resource center to tell us how to go through the steps? We don't have none of this stuff. But you always hear people say, well, this person know it. It does us no good, Black America. If all of the knowledge is in your head and it's not digitally out there, it's not a program set up for us to get it. I can't just depend on the person that got the knowledge. Where is it at that we could get to it? I've been on calls, people asking, how do I start a nonprofit? How do I start a business? How do I get a job? And everybody's like, oh, well, you need to do this. You need to go here. You need to do this. But we don't have a place where it's like, here's the steps. And this is what I'm trying to work on. There's so many things I'm trying to work on, but I see the problem. But I'm like, why are we not investing into that? To uplift our community, when we're talking about a resource center, a success center, or an opportunity center, we should be, as Black people, able to walk in there and they should be able to walk us through step by step. And we got resources there. How do we empower our community? We have to have the resources. Once we get the resources financially, we have to put together something that is going to amplify and promote that success. We don't have it. We like, hey, we gave you this, go figure it out. But we don't have that system in place where it's like, hey, this is step one. Go here. We're going to have somebody here with this resource. Check in, make sure you get everything. Oh, it costs $300 for a business license. Don't worry. Our organization is going to give you the $300 to get people off the ground. Oh, you need to do this. This is important. These are the classes you need to take. It should be a full one-stop shop. And there's other cultures that they have that. So when I hear people say, oh, no. I've been around some of these different nonprofits, and I'm going to tell you right now, they got an A to Z process, how to get their people on. This is who you go to for a website. This is who you go to for a logo. This, like, I've seen the process. So again, these people that's bragging about 20, 30, 40 years, I've been doing this, and then I come in here as a new person, and I've heard other new people come in here like, how do I get this? How do I access this? And again, have we become our oppressors of ourselves? Because again, it's so much individual self-recognition and this mentality of, oh, if we help them out, there's more people in the piece of pie, that's less money we get, right? So again, the poverty pimps in our community got to get called out. When I get phone calls from people, they say, hey, man, I reached out to this organization, these people, they supposed to put me on and help me, and they been BSing, they keep telling me they go help me, but they never help me. Like, are we oppressing our own people? Because a lot of times I'm seeing oppression from our own people. Like, in the little bit of money that people are going after these crumbs, like, we ain't even really fighting for what we really should be getting. But then the little bit of opportunity that we have, we are oppressing our own people and we're not uplifting our people. So that's why the question is out there. What does this ProBack look like? What does this unifying the community look like? Because a lot of people talk about unifying our people, unifying the community. But when you go into the community, there's a big division. And, even in some of the other cultures, when there's differences and divisions, one thing it is, they all stick together and they might have their differences. But when we come together as one united front. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've been to many rallies. I've been to many events. And it's always a big pocket of Black folks missing in action because, again, the lack of the centralized communication, mobilization, getting the information out to the people and holding the people in the community accountable to get off their butts and get out there. But again, When it's us to show up, and this is why sometimes this slave mentality. When it comes to other cultures, we will show up in drones. I have seen Black people mobilize for other issues, other cultures, like none other. It's like, whoa, we out here for this. Like it's hundreds of Black folks. But we got a little Black boy who was racially profiled and 50 people showed up. That's a disgrace, community. It's a disgrace. We got to be able to put our differences with organizations. I might don't agree with everything, but I'm going to show up because, again, do we really care about our kids? At that point, it's forget the leadership, forget the organization. We got a Black boy who just been racially profiled and traumatized. Okay. And then he had to be on the news with his family. And that's another part of what we don't want to deal with, but we don't show up. 50 people, huh? But let something happen in another community when we're talking about solidarity, boy. And I'm telling you right now, these leaders, boy, they be out there in drones. Every congregation is out there. We 500, 600 deep when it comes to them. But our own Black folks, we missing in action. So again, we need to revisit what solidarity looks like. It's 365 days as community on all issues. And again, if we ain't showing up for our own issues, shame on us, because it's happening a lot. It's happening way too much. And again, it's cancel culture. We got to get away from it, and we got to uplift each other, and we got to stop standing silent. Too many leaders are misleading us down the wrong path, doing things that are definitely further dividing the community when it comes to policies and what we're trying to do. We got to really stick together as a community and think about what we need to do, especially here in San Francisco. I know a lot of people on here from different parts of the country, but I can only talk about my city, San Francisco. We have to do better. There's a reparation committee that is coming up for talking about reparations in San Francisco. San Francisco is about 5% Black in San Francisco. And again, I'm holding all of those reparation committee people accountable. If y'all ain't talking about giving our people, the 5% of people in San Francisco, $2.5 million so that they can pay off their school debts, purchase homes, build up their businesses, that is a small percentage of what the overall city and county budget is. Even if you're talking about $100 million, $200 million, a lot of these organizations are asking for that. We need to ask for our people to be put in a position to get this money. And I think that's a fair amount right now, where we at in this state of our San Francisco. I'm speaking of, I'm going to say the country, because in San Francisco, the medium home is going to cost you about $1 to $1.5 million to buy a home in San Francisco, right? So we got to, when we looking at this $2.5 million, it's still apples. It ain't nothing, right? Because 1.5 of that is going to home ownership to buy a home in San Francisco. And then the other 1.5 is paying off the student debt, paying off of the things that have been impacted with these disparities over the years, and how we've been taken advantage of when it comes to taxes and these policies, and also building up businesses. So if you got that $1.5 million, that is a good start to get a business off the ground, to have Black impact. And I hope they had those conversations in a way that is real. And I'm just going to keep pushing that. So thank everybody for joining today. I know it's a little over, but I think this was an important conversation. I think this conversation is going to need to continue. It is so many issues in our Black community that we are dealing with, and it's never enough time to deal with them all. But we definitely got to start sticking together in solidarity, especially when we're talking about our mental health, our housing, and our education, because we are getting hit the hardest there in our employment. We didn't even touch on the disparities in jobs and opportunities to make wealth and build wealth. It is just a sad day. And if anybody's sitting around here bragging about 50 years of what they did on a political standpoint, and to our leaders into the community, shame on you, because we are in a bad position in this country, and we are worse off now than we've been since we've been in the civil rights and before. So we got more work to do. It is not over. We're going to continue to have these conversations. I'm looking forward to the continued conversations with community, because this is not going away. And this Thursday, we'll have another educational Thursday. We got a phenomenal sisters coming on, and she's going to really talk about some of the things that our elders in the community are dealing with when it comes to this housing issue, this crisis that is about to really hurt us, for some of these people who are challenged to pay their mortgages and rent during this pandemic, and some of our landlords. So just looking forward to her coming on. And then this Tuesday, we'll have another segment of Hidden Gems, where we will continue to highlight our Black and brown businesses and our community leaders that are doing phenomenal things to impact our community. And then next Sunday, we'll put out our Sunday conversation. We had a conversation put in place and we're going to change it, but we'll get that out to community as soon as possible. So thank you all for coming on today. Thank you all for community watching. I hope you got something about this. I hope something was triggered in somebody so that Monday morning, for the people that do have an opportunity to make change, not only in their organization, politically, that we start putting our heads together and really start making change. And like Ayoola said, in our educational system, we have to find a way to raise the pay, to get our Black and brown teachers back in the classroom. We need a shift in education, our curriculum, and how we do about this business, because we don't want these talented people like Ayoola and different people on here having to switch over to different fields just to have a way of living. We got to prioritize our educational system. So thank you all for joining today. We're going to end today's live. Have a blessed one, everybody, and continue to fight in this country. We are not where we need to be, but we will continue to march until we get where we're going. And we'll see you all this Tuesday.